Okay.
Well, apparently you're doing something now.
I don't know. Okay,
No,
everybody
he's a
sees
whiz.
Cocos Keelings.
He's a real whiz.
You can see Cocos Keelings,
Yep.
the exhibit. Okay.
Yes.
Hi, Steve Zarinsky, President of the Society of Australasian Specialists. Happy to have Bruce Haynes, hailing all the way from Western Australia, which I think is just the other side of the Hudson here. And
As far as Americans are
he's going to
concerned.
be that's like yes. Anyway, he's going to make a presentation now on Cocos Keelings, and I will be there'll be more presentations coming up. I'm just getting them organized, and then an announcement will go out about that. Anyway, so Bruce, why don't I let you introduce yourself and take it away, and then just let me know when you want to switch from one page to the next. Okay.
Thank you, Steve. And I remain in awe of your technological skill and the fact that you do realise there is another side to the Hudson River. Um, that's wonderful.
It's been impressed upon me, but not by my choice.
I understand that. Okay, so this particular display is one of about 100 that I have. I'm currently trying to downsize because my children have said that I'm not allowed to die till I clean up my mess. So what I now do is I put stuff together, put it into some form of an exhibit, and then try and dispose of it. So much of this material has now actually been disposed of. But as far as the Cocos Keeling is concerned, it's a study which I did, but part of the West Australian study group stuff, because Cocos has two post offices, and they are the two most remote post offices in the West Australian Postal Administration. So currently Cocos Island is part of Western Australia in terms of postal systems. I've only been there once, and my wife was most displeased with my effort because she said, oh, why don't we go and have a look at something about the place instead of just visiting post offices? So that's the nature of the beast in terms of this particular collection. So why don't we go to the next one? Steve? There we go. So that's just the background stuff. The feature of Cocos is that it has a couple of highlights philatelically, and for the most part, not much. The two islands that are inhabited, there's Home Island, in which the Clunies-Ross family brought out the Malays to service their coconut plantation. And then there's West Island, which has the airport on it. And the feature about the airport is that it is now in process of being expanded as part of a forward defence base for the Australian forces. Not quite Diego Garcia, but an Australian version of it. So Cocos has, for the most part, not seen much activity, but there's some going on there at present. Okay, so the next one, Steve. That's the shape of the display as such. One of the things about it is that there was one collector of Cocos material, that was Colin Riddell in England, and he happened to have contact with the Clunies-Ross family and purchased much of their philatelic holdings, just odds and ends of family stuff. And that constitutes the major body of the significant philatelic of material that's available. In general, there's not much about at all. Riddell's material was sold through Abacus Auction a couple of years ago, and it was most peculiar because there were several of us in Australia who were trying to collect the material. I put in bids on 34 items and got 2. But this was because there was one Malaysian millionaire who'd suddenly discovered that philately was a way to become important, and he decided he would buy the lot at any price. That has therefore somewhat distorted the pricing of Cocos material. The market is starting to settle down a bit, but nevertheless, some of the material is still extremely expensive compared to what it used to be. but in terms of rarity, I mean, it certainly is. Okay, next. In terms of Cocos fame, the point of that is that nobody tended to know much about it because the Clooney's-Ross family with Hare settled it in 1840, and as a result, they sat in the middle of the ocean with an occasional visit by a schooner to take off the Cocos and cocoa, and nobody else paid any attention to it. And then the British established a cable station there on Direction Island, and then at the outbreak of World War One, the Australian forces were to be, and New Zealand forces were to be transported to Egypt to defend the Suez Canal, and then to go to the Western Front. And en route, they were particularly concerned because SMS Emden was wandering around sinking large amounts of Allied shipping as a raider. And then the Emden turned up at Cocos. Cocos put out a message. The Sydney was detached from the convoy. The battle ensued and Emden was sunk. This particular photo is one of a large number of photos, in this case of the German landing party. The German landing party couldn't get back to the ship in time before it took off to fight the Sydney, so they commandeered the schooner, which was in the lagoon, and then sailed to Sumatra and then got on the ship from there, landed in Turkey, took the rail through to Berlin, and there were accorded a great celebration for their pretty remarkable escape. So apart from that particular incident, the only serious connection with the outside world was the telegraph. Okay, next one. The postal system, well, the only postal stuff really was occasional mail that was sent probably 2 or 3 times a year to Singapore or sometimes Batavia. The only other connection was the telegraph, and the officers on the telegraph station sent messages to Fremantle, well, Perth, and those were transcribed by hand onto West Australian postcards and posted. So that mail is one of the distinctive features, and that continued for about 20 years. But in this whole period, very little mail exists at all. The opening of the Straits Settlement Postal Agency, because the Cocos was under the Straits Settlements, that agency opened, but because there was so little use, then closed. As a result, there are very few strikes of the various date stamps. The original one, there's only a few. The registered cover, if we can go to that, Steve, that little job. I sold my West Australian postal markings collection, and the next day then attended the local auction at which this cover came up as the only example known, and then spent the entire proceeds of that collection to get it. So at that stage, for me, it was my most expensive purchase. When I went to sell it, it's now one of 3 known, which is, of course, the fate of postal historians. Some rascals, once you have the only one known, tend to spoil your day. But nevertheless, it's a seriously significant item for the Cocos collectors, and with one of them sitting in Malaya until such time as we don't know. Colin Riddell had one and I had one, so that was basically the nature of the scarcity of this material.
Well, there should be 82. It should be at least 82 others, right?
Oh,
Because it's registered.
absolutely. But as you know, oh, that's a nice stamp. We'll soak that off.
Yeah, yeah.
The story of the postal historian. So yes,
Right.
there should be. There certainly should be. Okay, next. So that's basically the Aisha was the Clooney-Ross schooner. But as much of that mail, as I say, is handled by the agents in Singapore, unless it's got a recognisable address, etc., or handwriting, it's going to be extremely difficult to recognise mail postally used through that period. Okay, next. So these are the telegraphic postcards. Okay, next
Oh,
one.
you want me to move on? Okay,
Yep, thanks.
sorry.
Yep.
I'm sorry that we have this box around things. I apologize. Not quite sure how that got like that. I'm not sure I can get rid of it. But anyway,
or any need for the same. So that's the sort of thing there. So the reason one knows that that is a Cocos Island is that the officers at the telegraph station in in Mosman Park, as it happens, headed at Cocos Island. So unless you know the addressee, you wouldn't recognise it from this side. Okay, go again. Mrs. Forden got quite a large number of these. I expect about half of them go to that address. So even if they hadn't transcribed it on the other, that would enable you to recognise why it was that this mail was Cocos. Thanks. Again, Inward's correspondence has only come onto the market recently, and it was basically a single correspondence. Because it comes via Singapore, some of it goes on to the Penang to Singapore TPO and is dealt with there, but the vast majority of it not. It is just simply struck it with a Singapore receiving marker and held there for several months until the next ship went. Okay, next. Again, same sort of thing.
it's short paid.
So they would have said, but that's an argument. I don't know why it would be short paid, and I can absolutely assure you that nobody on Cocos would have paid it to anybody. And
Huh.
I'm pretty sure that the agent in Singapore wouldn't have done it either.
Would pay even less. Yeah.
I don't recognise that mark as an English paid mark, so I don't know what that is. On the other hand, this one is a fairly difficult little job to get it. It's the only pre-war one that I've seen until this auction took place, and that one had the attraction of a fairly high rate. It has the disadvantage of going over 2 sheets, but one deals with that.
Is there an inbound mark on the backside by
No,
chance?
no, just a Singapore. There's nothing there. There's no post office there at the time, so there's no possibility of any Cocos markings. So this is before the post office opened in 1933. Okay. Again, wartime stuff. World War One. There is another one that was in the Riddell sale. So, I mean, that's the level of scarcity of this kind of material. Yep. Go to the next
Oh,
one.
I'm just waiting for you to tell me. I don't want to do it
Yeah,
too soon.
no. I'm quite happy with that. Yep. Go for the next one. Okay. Now we've gone through the war stuff. There's the bit of stuff for the Straits Settlements Post Office. The only other pre-World War II excitement was the Goober 2 survey flight. This is a Catalina. It was owned by one American gentleman who disported himself round the place with his own little Catalina. Spent 12 months in New Guinea doing an anthropological survey and stuff there. And on the way, deciding to come home, one of the gentlemen who were part of the aero mob that were opening up new flights. The famous one, of course, is Kingsford Smith, but the thought was that it might be useful if the existing Imperial Airways connection between England and Australia, which ran through a number of rather difficult areas, Palestine, for instance, Iraq and India, those all of them having their various difficulties at some time. If, for instance, there was any thought of a war, it might be a good idea if there was a backup route between Australia and England as far as these new aircraft were concerned. So Taylor then persuaded the Australian government that he should charter the Goober on its way back to New York and fly from Sydney through to Kenya to prove an alternate route for flying boats. The Australian government was so enthused that it decided not only to do that, but it would create a new 5-shilling stamp to celebrate this and offset the cost, of course. The only difficulty was that the Kenyan government would not agree to accepting this or accepting the mail, and so that stamp was never issued.
Why
However,
was Kenya not for it? What?
that I've never found an official reason. It's
Seems kind
just
of
that
curious.
I've never gone into the archives in
Mm.
Melbourne to see if there was actually any correspondence which detailed that. It's just it was to happen, and then no, Kenya says no, and so they wouldn't accept the mail from this aircraft. So the flight took place. So as it's indicated there, and the thing about it was, of course, because there's no postal system on Cocos, the Clooney's Ross cachet was used as a recognition that it had landed there. So this particular thing, if we go to the next one, this particular thing shows the Clooney's Ross cachet. It's one of, I think, 2 which were carried between Cocos and the Seychelles. It's addressed to Jack Percival, who was on board the aircraft. So these are all per favour creations. There's another one which goes to Diego Garcia, but the plane never landed there. That one was a Diego Garcia to Mauritius, but so that was a fantasy one. So when the mail arrived in Mombasa, not this one, this would have been kept in Jack Percival's pocket, but when the mail which was addressed from New South Wales or elsewhere, the crew just simply went to the post office and lodged it without official notice. But some of the mail went from New York to New York. So the Goober is a major survey flight and the first airmail out of, or to and from Cocos Island. Okay, next. Okay, there's the Goober when he's playing around in New Guinea.
Going to where? That's all right. It's
I
fantastic.
knew at one time, but I don't remember.
It's pretty
just
well known,
confirmed.
pretty well documented. You
Oh,
can
yeah,
find it if you look.
Yeah.
Oh yes,
And it was all it's sponsored by the American Museum of Natural History here in the west side. Okay.
yeah. It's the sort of strange things that American do when they go across the Hudson.
Yeah. Well.
Okay, next.
You really, and you want me to do what now?
Okay. Whoops, that's a bit quick. Let's go back. Oh, there you go. I was very pleased to have the only known item of mail from Cocos until Riddell's stuff came onto the market. And if we have a look at the next one, the actual wee bit, there he is. So as you can see, identifying that as Cocos mail, you have to turn it over and have a look at all the rest of it, but otherwise you wouldn't be able to tell. Because as there's no postal system there, this was mail which would have been sent to Sydney on whatever vessel, probably the Clooney's Ross schooner to Singapore and there to Australia. but now there are 3 of those. So if any of you are really keen to have one of those things, you've got one of 3 to choose from. Nondescript, but that makes it look, for me, much more attractive.
So
Thank you. Next.
did you discover this in someone's dollar box, or was it somebody else?
Absolutely. Yes, that's where it was. Yep. Yes. I tend to look
Wow.
at the back of envelopes rather than the front.
I guess you look at anything from Western Australia, and therefore you never know what you're going to see. So
Well, I looked at it and said, oh, Western Australia. Oh, yeah. Oh, so it was like that. Yes. Do I afford the whole dollar? Yes. Can I put it on lay-by? Okay, next.
wow, very nice. So that it means there's hope out there for the rest of us.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. So, given that the Poms were not doing too well in World War One, having managed to sink 2 of their major battleships because their aircraft carrier had got stuck on a reef in the West Indies, and was supposed to have been in Singapore looking after their 2 battleships, the Japanese sank them both without almost any loss. Then the task force, which had visited Pearl Harbor for some reason or another, decided to wander around the Southeast Asia area, and one of the things was to have a go at Ceylon, because at that stage the Japanese were invading Burma, heading into India, and the thought was that if they knocked out Ceylon, that would give them control of both sides of the ocean of India, and make the defence of India pretty much difficult. So the thought was that um, that particular task force did attack Ceylon. It was almost an identical disaster to the Pearl Harbor job. The only difference was the Poms knew the Japanese were coming, because a Canadian Catalina alerted them to the fact. But nevertheless, the Japanese attacked, surprisingly, on Easter Sunday, at which time the British had decided to close down their radar for routine servicing. So yeah, all good. How they won the war is beyond them. But nevertheless, when things got a bit better, because of course the British Eastern Fleet went to Kenya and stayed there for most of the war, but when they started to revive their fortunes, etc., the thought was that there would be an invasion both of Malaysia and of Indonesia, as it now, Sumatra in particular. So one of the thoughts was that they might use Cocos Island as a base. What the British had done, and they are clever on occasion, what they had done was to make sure that the Japanese didn't think that Cocos Island had any significance at all. The Japanese had knocked out the telegraph station. That is, they sent a destroyer, it bombarded it, and the British left a telegram on the desk of Imperial Telegraphs at Batavia when the Japanese arrived, saying, "Sorry, mate, we can't talk to you anymore, we've been knocked out." So the Japanese paid no further attention to Cocos Island. Cocos Island did have a part to play, because the double sunrise flight of the Catalinas from Perth to Colombo, which was the only airmail system or air connection system out of Australia during World War II, that went over but did not land. It used Cocos as a navigation point, but the idea was that it wouldn't land there in case the Japanese discovered that it was being used for some purpose. So as a result, during World War II, other than having a small contingent of Ceylonese militia manning the 2 6-inch guns on Direction Island next to the telegraph station, there was no activity at all. But the idea was that an airfield might be constructed on West Island, because it wasn't otherwise used except for growing coconuts. And as a result, therefore, the construction crews went there, and a significant number of British personnel were sent there, constructed the airbase, and then bombers and Spitfires operated out of there on targets in Sumatra and Java. As a result, therefore, you have military mail of this kind. The RAF Post Colombo is shown there in all its glory. That one is reasonably clear. If you go to the next one, thanks. However, RAF Post 301, that's as good as it gets. They were very consistent in having very scruffy markings. Clearly, the orderly wasn't instructed to clean it or do much with it. It was so. This military mail, of which there is a fair amount, getting a good strike of these markings is quite difficult. Okay, next. Okay, next. As I said, there's a difficulty in getting a serious marking on this one. I'll ignore that. That's my wife trying to ring me. Next. Oh, no, go back. No, okay, next then. Okay, this next one, yeah. So that's just a newspaper cutting. Okay. And the letter, I like his cartographic skills. So if you don't know what Cocos looks like, that's it. The West Island, as you can see there, the long narrow bit is where the airfield is. And Home Island is the larger one to the northeast. Direction Island is the one detached up at the north there. The rest are
I'm surprised they allowed this information to go through the mail.
no, this is post-war.
Oh,
November.
oh, my bad. Okay, sorry.
Yep. All right. Next. Yep. All right. So I collected this stuff sort of from about 1980 onwards, and only about 10 or so years ago did I discover that there was a scheduled air service through Cocos in 1945. One of the best kept secrets there was, not just my ignorance. So after the war, KLM was endeavouring to re-establish connections with Java, with Indonesia. This, of course, is at the time when the war between the nationalists and the Dutch was going on. So the whole that business went from basically 1945 to 49. So there was warfare going on all the time. So to get a scheduled airline through there, KLM then came through, got permission through India, which was not always easier for them, then through Colombo, and then came via Cocos Island. And that avoided coming through Singapore, which was difficult at the time anyway. So, the next one. Those of you whose Dutch is good, okay, that just says no philatelic mail will go through. This philatelic mail just clearly did. But nonetheless, the point being is that the airspace was so limited that they didn't want to be flooded by these stupid philatelists. Next.
I guess it's a change in attitude where at one time they would look to the philatelists to pay for some kind of sundry event. I guess after the war that wasn't the case anymore.
No,
So,
well, I mean, they were trying to ship out personnel to try and run the country, etc. Yeah, no, wartime shortage.
yeah,
No, it was a marked change. I mean, the Imperial Airways, the flying boats, were there to carry mail, and if the mail was too heavy, they would offload passengers in order to carry the mail. I mean, that was what the Imperial Airways was about.
right.
In their Empire mail scheme. But likewise with the with the double sunrise flights of the Catalinas from Perth to Ceylon, the loading was very much determined on what was military priorities. So even things like aircrafts were offloaded if the weight limits couldn't handle it. So okay, so these are the forms of mail which were carried at the time. Again, these little items are nice because it means that unless you know the date and are paying attention to it, this is a $5 item. If you know the date, it's not. So again, it's while you trawl through the dollar boxes and see what you can find. Okay, thank you. Next. All right, so again, the standard exercise in terms of airmail stuff. Part of the attraction of collecting airmail, which I resisted for 40 years because I thought it was nonsense. Who the hell wants pilot signatures and things? But in this case, for instance, what it is that the Qantas BOAC arrangements are such that what one has are test letters coming through to prove that mail has come through and how long it's taken. So collecting test letters strikes me as being a significant element of error philately. And in this particular case, it's coming through the Cocos Island, which was going quite happily. At that stage, they'd moved. The Catalinas had been replaced and they were using Liberators and then subsequently Lancasters converted for civil purposes as their long-range aircraft. And that went quite happily for a little while. This one, as you can see, comes through in February 46. But in March 46, one of the Lancasters didn't quite make landfall. Has never been discovered, never found. As a result, therefore, they heading from Colombo to Cocos. As a result, therefore, they reopened the Singapore route because there was no particular virtue of running it through Cocos as such. Once Singapore became a viable option, and it provided them with far more connections to the Far East. Okay, next. All right, so again, the Straits settlements are in control, run through Singapore, of the mail systems on Cocos, and in the post-war period, Lee Parkin was an officer at the Cable and Wireless Station, and given, I'm not sure that he was very keen on fishing or in this case on Direction Island, he could have looked at the buff-banded rail, which is an endangered species, but that's about the limit of the excitement that you can get on Direction Island. I've been on there and I've seen both. But to keep himself amused, I suspect, I'm not sure he actually did it for commercial gain. He produced a huge amount of, well, huge in Cocos terms, amount of mail with distinctive cachets to show the various means of communication that were taking place. So without him, that period would be a total loss. So this one is just one of the official correspondences together with commercial mail. Well, in this case, commercial mail, Lee Parkin writing to friends in England. Okay, next. The airmail stuff was ceased once the war finished and the post-war flights were rerouted through Singapore. However, the Australians discovered that it would be quite nice, perhaps, if we could have direct flights from Australia to South Africa. And again, the idea was that a test flight should be undertaken. In this case, as you can see, using land aircraft, not flying boats. And as a result, therefore, in 1948, you have the test flight. They all suffered the disease of being signed. Nevertheless, but they do record the two different stickers on them to show the two different directions. Okay, next one. So the tin can mail and the RMS Orion and all the rest of it, all that is Lee Parkin's work, and has created considerable interest in this period. So what happened was that even before the war, the P&O liners would schedule as a mid-ocean entertainment a drive past of Cocos Island. Given that between Colombo and Fremantle, there is not a whole lot of tourist interest. Watching the ocean does tend to enthrall few people for a long time. So what they would do was they'd drive past the Cocos Islands, wouldn't stop there, and they would drop the mail in what was variously called a cask or a barrel, and they would pick up one from Cocos, which would carry mail outwards. Other things were included in the cask on the inwards one. Sometimes it was groceries and things of other sorts like that. So what one has then is this regular tourist thing and on the passenger liners. And so there you have the Orion, which was one of the main offenders of this sort, with these various cachets. One of the things about it is that occasionally the tin can or cask would leak a bit, and so you can have damaged mail as well. And you can see the staining at the top there, which is adds to the attraction of it.
They had a marking made up. Somebody produced a rubber CD, I guess.
Well, that's what Lee Parkin was doing, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So he was doing it as a private individual, had no postal validity whatsoever.
No, but, yeah.
But it created, and like, yes, next one, yeah, there. So in this case, he recorded the fact that there was supposed to have been a flight coming in from Singapore, and all of a sudden that had been changed to being a RAF Sunderland aircraft, a flying boat, because the governor of Singapore decided he'd do a vice-regal visit to his outlying area. And so what you have is the self-addressed item from Lee Parkin, plus his commercial mail. So he had mail sitting there in the agent's office, and they just stuck it on the aircraft at the local rate, as it happens, not an airmail rate. So useful little items due to the fact that you have this person who is, in effect, de facto postmaster.
Now, why did it go through Singapore as opposed to say Malaya?
Well, Singapore is Malaya.
Well, no. Oh, yes.
Oh, yes, it is.
No, yeah, yes, it is. But what I'm saying is, why did they choose the Singapore post office to? So like so it's
Singapore is the entrepot port for Southeast Asia. Everything goes to Singapore.
and that's why Singapore versus another town in the Malayan.
Oh yeah, well, all shipping goes through the Malacca Straits,
Mm-hmm.
and
Okay.
so all the Malayan towns are of no significance in international trade or postal systems. Everything goes through Singapore,
Okay,
as it
got it.
still does today. So if you take the flight out from Perth, you go to Singapore. Yep.
Got it. Okay.
Next, try the next one. Yep. Sometimes it didn't work. The Wave Baron was a barge, and the drop didn't work, so that it carried the mail that was supposed to go out on the Wave Baron through to Colombo. that's probably about half the known examples. Okay, next. All right, so having done the survey flight in 48, eventually it was decided that they would make the connection between Australia and South Africa using Cocos and Mauritius. So a survey flight was done by Qantas to do that. A very small mail, and I again emphasise very small mail, was carried. It wasn't advertised. And in this case, it was, as you can see, it was carried from Sydney to Cocos in May, but it didn't come back to Perth until August. The assumption is that the writer wanted Lee Parkin to deal with it, and it didn't get a connection until the Orion came through in August. Okay, next.
Sorry.
Okay. Oh, yeah, there we go. There we go. Having done the survey flight, the construction squadron landed there and had to rebuild the airfield, because of course it basically was just a whole lot of joined together bits of metal sheeting, which was the airfield. And then over the half dozen years since the war, that had deteriorated. So they had to rebuild the airfield, and the construction squadron was resupplied by Qantas aircraft coming in once a fortnight. So I made something of a specialty of trying to find these particular covers which would enable me to have one from every one of the flights. I got to the point I had one I didn't have, but no one else has managed to actually construct a complete collection of that. Again, it's a matter of going through, well, these are not the dollar boxes, because if it says Cocos Island, it's got some value. But you can get those at a $10 job if you're dealing with a dealer who doesn't know what they're doing. But getting the right date is the trick. Try the next one. Yep. The bottom cover is a Bergen cover. He was a South Australian fella who constructed all sorts of imaginative first day covers. In this particular case, he missed the inaugural flight and didn't come on until the second, but that's okay. What he also did was he would take existing first aid covers, and the word was augment them. He would add extra decoration to them. So for those people who are addicted to first aid cover collecting, I think both of them, they find these things attractive. I just find it attractive because it missed what it was aimed at do. Okay, next. So then, having the survey flights completed, the system was put into place so that we could have regular flights, and those were weekly flights. And what that meant was, of course, apart from anything else, that there was a need to have postal systems to deal with the philatelic constraints, and also, of course, it possibly might have been able to serve the uses of passengers in transit. So these are examples of the philatelic concoction. Qantas was a major offender in producing these first flight commemorative covers, and it's a question of how many would you like for $1? Well, they don't tell them, but I mean, they are plentiful to say the least. I forget the registration number on the back of it, but it's in the 50,000 type thing. And Miss Hodson was an assiduous collector of Indian Ocean stuff. So that's why that one. Next. Okay, in this particular case, what we've got is that the reopened Singapore Postal Agency using Singapore stamps with the Cocos Island Council. mail during this period is quite difficult to find. It's particularly difficult trying to find anything that looks like the covers from which these were cut. I've never seen anything like a $4 or a $2, etc. It's usually just the 10-cent job. Not many of them exist. Okay, next. Keep going. Oh, the Queen. She's not. Yes, she is. Oh, yes. But if she is going to visit, oh, really? But there's not going to be any philatelic celebration of this. The Australia Post is not going to mark it in any way whatsoever. The post office won't deal with any incoming mail trying to do that. And as a result, these things were quite scarce. Sometimes the post office tends to puzzle me. No, they always puzzled me. They always overproduce huge philatelic stuff in order to become a multi-marketer, and yet on this occasion they decided not to. Okay, next.
So how many of those cached royal visit covers were there?
Oh,
50, 100?
that sort of range.
Hmm.
Yeah.
The one at the
Whereas
bottom, I don't think I've seen before. That
yeah,
seems to be, I think it's scarcer, but who knows? Okay.
yep, and going to Singapore also. Yep. Whereas the other one was the Qantas person doing it. All right, now this one. So this is the first flight of domestic mail coming out. So what we have is the post office to open, Australia, and there is to be a domestic flight coming from Cocos to Perth, and to be a cachet. So yes, Australia Post advertised that, as you can see, and that advertising, as you can see, is the top bit doesn't show it much. Lynn's advertised it, so that's all going very well. And you can send your covers to Melbourne and they will be serviced. Except, okay, try the next one. Oh, no, that's not, okay, let's go back to the problem with
sorry.
this. That's all right. The problem with this, I haven't shown all the other ones, is that Australia Post really got excited, and so did the philatelists. So they flooded Melbourne with covers to be serviced, which is all well and good, except that the system was not quite as efficient as it was supposed to be. And in this particular case, by the time the flight actually took place in November, it was supposed to have been April, Qantas had changed the route. So unlike the cachet, which shows it going to Perth, it actually went to Darwin. So, and this is marked by the interest in this particular case is that Australia Post not only was flooded with these first flight covers, it was Australia's shortest postal rate. It only lasted 1 day. That is, in this particular case, the ordinary airmail rate had a 6p surcharge added to it, except mail to Australia, which was 5p halfpenny surcharge. So it's a 1 day rate just for this flight. So if you're chasing a distinctive Australasian rate, that's it. The material is plentiful, except I have never seen anything addressed to South America. I've got it to Mexico, but not South America. Not surprising, but that is a rate I've never seen used. Okay, try the next one. All right, part of the problem with Cocos Island, it's not the only one. In fact, there are three. And what you have are difficulties on occasion with people not knowing whether it's Cocos Indian Ocean or Cocos Pacific Ocean. Okay, next. You do have tourists going through on the aircraft. South African Airways opened in 57. But the thing about it is, given that there is nothing to do when you get off the aircraft except get back on, one would have anticipated a large number of piggy postcards being sent from Cocos. Not so. They didn't exist. There weren't lots of piggy postcards, and people didn't send a lot. So they are particularly difficult to find. Next. But what we have is Cocos Keeling Islands. And in this particular case, Cocos Keeling Islands, Indian Ocean, as you can see on the postmark. Reason for that? The trouble is, missent mail. So we have to be very overt as to what it is. So the name is no longer Cocos, it's Cocos Keeling. Keeling is the island to the north, and it's Indian Ocean. So I'll ignore that one too. So basically what one has is the Australian system taking over, and in this case, issuing Cocos Keeling stamps. Those stamps are valid for postage in Australia. Unlike Christmas Island, whose stamps were in Malayan currency, they were not valid in Australia. So I have had a dispute with my local post office when I was using Cocos Island stamps, the pre-1979 ones, and the local post office says they're not valid for postage. I said, yes, they are. So they send them to the regional post office in Claremont. They said they're not valid. Send them to Perth. They're not valid. Send them to Melbourne GPO. No, they're not valid. But it just so happens that as the lad was typing out the letter saying these are not valid, Phil Collis said, look, I remember putting out the Philatelic Bureau in 1979, the bulletin, and yes, they are valid. Post office has no idea what it has in terms of its own.
Approved and not approved, yeah.
Yeah, anyway, so they're the first of the Cocos Island stamps. Try next.
I guess they're just institutional, not institutional memory.
Oh, Australia Post has sold off its archives, destroyed its records, and they do not keep records anymore. At one stage, in the late 1990s, they sponsored the Australia Post Cup as a research award, so that the philatelists could tell them what they were doing, because they had no idea. However. All right, as I said, picky postcards are a bit hard to come by, but they do exist. But it's taken me a long time to find very many of them. I would have perhaps seen 10 in total. Okay, next. Trying to get them at the right rate as well. Now, there's a real challenge. The first commemorative stamp, the Anzac, all the various territories, Papua New Guinea, Norfolk, etc., produced the same design as the Australian, this one. The interest is in particular trying to find a postally used example. Picking the first day covers of various commercial of origin, absolutely thick upon the ground. But trying to find one that is not used on the 14th of April as a first day cover is a real challenge. Okay, try next. So again, what one has is an attempt to collect philatelic stuff. Okay, that's the bottom stuff. But getting actual, and the top one is just used in valid use in Western Australia. Next. Yes, a couple of these exist. A philatelic creation of great imagination, a gentleman sending it off, as you can see, to Israel, with distinctive shapes of material. Let's not worry about the rate, shall we? The important thing there is the bit down in the bottom left. There was a requirement that mail going into Israel at this time, 1974, be cleared for transmission. We can go back here, because of the problem of aircraft being attacked by terrorists, and so I've seen this not only for Cocos but also from one post office, I think Melbourne, but that's it. But I've never seen it other than this kind of philatelic usage. Must exist, but I've never seen it, and certainly not from Cocos. This is the only.
So Israel was asking other countries to inspect the mail first
Well,
before they.
to require it to be inspected before it could be posted, yes, because of their current situation.
The security concerns. Yeah.
Yeah, there'd been a terrorist attack on aircraft in Libya. Okay, so that's what that is. Next. All right. Now we're starting to actually get some commercial mail occurring. So these things exist, but for the most part, you're still talking the dollar box. Okay. 1979, for reasons which passeth all understanding, Australia Post decided that they would hive off their activity, and that Cocos and Christmas Islands would have their own local postal systems, their own postal administrations.
How many
And
people in
so,
Cocos then?
sorry?
How many people are in Cocos at this point?
Oh, well, I mean, it hasn't changed much, circa 600. A bit more than one of the rocks in the Grenadines of St. Vincent, but nonetheless, not what you'd call a massive postal demand. So as a result, they got set up, and Derek Brennan was then the postal system. Basically, he was, and they then contracted their own postmark creation and their own postal stamps and all the rest of the philatelic phenomenon, with their own standing order arrangements, etc. So yes, the whole philatelic caboodle there, and so those are the particular items which were created, some of which were nearly commercial. But as you can see there, the one at the bottom, unfortunately, is posted from New South Wales, and the post office, of course, doesn't know what's valid. The current arrangements in Australia is if you put something on the envelope, it will go through. But if you don't, well, maybe it'll be stopped, but probably not. So they wouldn't have known that this whole arrangement had changed. Cocos stamps were always valid, so they still are. Okay, next. Again, I mean, one of the things I did, and the one up the top there was, I would go down every Friday afternoon to the external studies section and collect a mailbag full of envelopes of students' mail that had come in during the week with their assignments and correspondence. And when I retired, there were 250 cartons of this mail under my house. So you can see why my kids said I have to clean up my mess before I die. I've now downsized, and I've got rid of the sea container and half my daughter's garage, but I'm still working on the other half. So that is an example of commercial mail coming in from a teacher on Cocos Island to ECU. But the one at the bottom is, if you can find one of those, you've got a real win. That is commercial use of the 1 cent rate. Now, that is the lowest rate of any Australian postal administration, inflation adjusted.
That's local.
It's local. And it was a 1 cent rate of the Cocos administration. So for mail between Home Island and West Island, it was a 1 cent rate. So if you want to even adjust that for inflation, it's much cheaper than the halfpenny newspaper rate in the colonial periods, etc. So cheapest rate. And there you are, all three covers. One of them's a first day cover, It's the only first day cover I have ever found that has any philatelic significance. That is, the 1 cent rate was never advertised. Why would you? All 600 people who were going to use it already knew. And it wasn't anything of any interest to anybody else, so they didn't put it out. So eventually people found out that they had these 1 cent stamps and that they were actually being postally used. Yes, well, that one is commercially used. I had my friend who went up to visit the school there send a letter, and there is a first day cover. So if you manage to find one of those little jobs, you're in real winner. Okay, next. Exactly why Derek discovered that he was short of stamps, I don't know. He wandered off to the eastern states before I could get hold of him to go through this. And also, one of my greatest ever failings is that the government printing services in West Leederville in Perth closed down. And only too late did I then realise that I should have rushed out there and said, have you got the printing plates that you use to overprint these things? Because they sent some sheets of stamps down to this government printing office, and they overprinted these emergency stamps. And so you have these particular rates, some denominated, some not. The two designs of the 10 cents are there. Okay, next. Commercial mail is...
Can I interrupt for a second?
Go. Yep.
I had an experience with that overprinted set.
Yep.
I was at a divorce in Toronto, and
Yep.
a new issue dealer, who I never looked at, had 5 sets sitting there, and he wanted
Good.
$20 each for them, and I knew they were kind of odd and unusual and rare.
Yeah.
So I tried to buy all 5, and he said, "No, I'm not selling you all 5. I'm missing something. If you tell me what I'll sell you 3, but you have to tell me what I'm missing." So I got my 3 and
Yeah.
sold 2 off and paid for the other one in spades. So,
With or without the CTO local?
CTO was in there too.
Oh,
Yep.
good. Yep, good.
It was a quite a remarkable. You talk about going through dollar boxes. This was right in front on his under the plastic sheet on his table.
Yep. So the 10 cent does tend to have a few odd printing spots because, it was just a rush job at the local print shop down in Perth. Yep. So as you can see, they actually had commercial uses. It wasn't a philatelic concoction. I'm not sure whether I've got the 1 cent job in there, but I did send up a query because there was a rumour going around that they were short of 1 cent stamps. At that stage, I had no idea that there was a local rate. And then there's the correspondence I've got back saying, no, there is no shortage of 1 cent stamps. Oops, guess what? Yes, there is. But okay, next.
Interesting.
Okay, so what I've tried to do in my display was to actually get an example of each of the various postal rates that are under Australia Post, etc. And that has proved particularly difficult. The 27 cent rate only marked by 1 stamp, and I haven't as yet got a commercial usage of them. So, I mean, as both clearly those are commercial usage as opposed to philatelic. Okay, next. However, when I did go to Cocos Island in 2021, what I was able to achieve for the first time in my life, and I suspect anybody else's, was to puzzle the hell out of the locals, not just my wife. So when we were wandering around, we went to the local hardware shop where she bought a pearl necklace, which is what you do at a hardware store. But I would say, have you got any old envelopes lying around from your mail? which provoked in them rather considerable puzzlement, and likewise when on Christmas Island. I have never seen any local posted mail. So neither Cocos nor Christmas, of course, have home delivery. If you post mail locally or whatever else, you go to the post office and hand it in. And if you want to collect mail at all, you have to go to the post office and collect it, which is only just down the road, so it's of no great concern. But trying to find mail commercially used is extremely difficult. That is intra-island commercial mail. And so the problem in you can see here what one has up the top there is an example of commercial mail coming in from Melbourne in this case. The actual addressee is a bit hard to read at the back there, but nevertheless, the trying to find any intra-island mail or mail going into the island for commercial purposes, extremely difficult. Commercially produced first day covers that have never gone outside Melbourne, where they are produced and machine cancelled, you can buy that by the truckload. But I have never seen anything other than the few I managed to scrounge.
You'd think there'd be somebody who's got a garbage can there.
Well, nobody even thinks that they have any interest. I mean, you can see
Uh,
the scruffy rubbish that it is. Now, on Christmas Island, I needed to disport myself out in a pair of bathers to go for a swim, and so went to their surf and swim shop, etc. And while purchasing said item, under direction of the wife, of course, I said, "Have you got any mail?" "Oh, I'll have a look." And "Oh, I've got this on." "Oh, yeah, it's on the desk there. This is November. It's been sitting there since March. It's an invoice that they haven't yet got round to opening." This is island life. It's the way they operate.
well,
Just
they don't. It's not important to that.
absolutely not. I mean, if it's a bit like my mate who said, if I've got the way of dealing with memos. If I get a memo, I toss it in the bin. If it's really important, they'll send me another memo. So, if I haven't paid the invoice, well, they'll send me another one. So I've got these few bits of mail, but they are extremely difficult. And if you're collecting the philatelic mail of Cocos Island, why wouldn't you have that? And again, example of the tourist stuff. So, is there any more, or is we run to the end of it?
Is that it?
It looks like we've probably got there. Okay. Well done, Steve.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording. Although, no, I'm going to wait. Anybody have any questions? We keep it all on the. I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop sharing. No, okay. Okay. Anybody have questions?